Wonderful. Welcome to day 2 of AgMIP9, modeling the future of food. That's what we're here to do. Question, how did you like the reception last evening? Yeah. Whoa. Thank you so much to the organizers. It's Pamela, or I don't know if anyone is in the room, and Jen Kenrich, but it just was so wonderful. The weather cooperated without thunderstorms, and there is nothing like that balcony outside, right? So that was really wonderful. Okay, here we are on day 2. Alex and we're going to do some housekeeping, but we want to get to our wonderful keynote and plenary keynote and panel as soon as possible. So let's see, does this happen? Can we advance the slides? What's happening? Whoops. Yes, so that's, okay, here we go. Report backs. Okay, so one of the things that we have is homework. The homework assignment for anyone who led a session, this is the side sessions, and the working sessions. Please make one slide that is sharing the key points from your session. We're going to be doing a lightning round of the presentations of them tomorrow at 9 a.m. at the start of the plenary. So please send that single slide to agmip@columbia.edu by tonight. Any questions on that? It'll be like one slide in 1 minute. Yes? Paper sessions? No, not paper sessions.
Side meetings and working sessions.
Side sessions and working sessions. Okay, good clarification. All right. Now, here, every lunch we have a different theme. Yes? What's happening?
It does say you are screen sharing.
Let's do it again. The participants aren't
Okay.
seeing it.
Hold on, we're hearing that the participants online can't see it, so we're going to
okay.
just do it again.
Good.
And then we'll do the whole
This-
screen.
We're making every effort to be fully hybrid. So thanks for everyone for bearing with all that. It's really important to be present for everybody. Hi, Ben.
All right. Hold on, I'm going to do one.
Welcome, by the way. Welcome to folks who are arriving today for day 2. Fantastic.
All right.
Okay. All right.
It's not showing up. There we go.
Yes, online people can see it now?
Hopefully good.
All right, send chat if you can't see the slides. All right, that's the homework assignment for the day. And then now on to the lunch. Every day for our 3 days of AgMIP9, we have a theme for lunch. Today is the Early Career Researcher Lunch. So here is the idea for this, that each lunch table should have a mix of people across the career stages. So don't sit around with just, your early career friends or your older, wow, it's so great to see you, of course, which it is. But this is to mix across the career stages. And they'll be, just as there was yesterday on the region table. By the way, how did the region tables work? Did it?
Interesting.
Yes? Interesting and good. Okay, Willington from Brazil is saying that it's good, that it went well. So that's good. They'll, just as there was yesterday, there'll be discussion questions on the table. Somebody take the lead to at some point during the lunch have the discussion. We really want to hear, and Carolina's here. Good. We really want to hear from the early career researchers. How can AgMIP help you? As you're getting going in your career. It's really super important. As everyone is saying, you are the future. You're the future of food security, of food and climate change, of food modeling and AgMIP. So we really need you and want to hear from you. With that, over to Alex for the photo and the hats.
Yeah, so after this morning's session, we're going to proceed outside to take a photo. We're going to hand out the hats on the way, so please make sure when you're working your way out the door that you stop by that front area and pick up hats. I don't know if, do we still have the list?
Yep, it's following
Down
the
here.
slide. Yes, let's
Yeah,
get
so
the
once
list
again,
again.
here's the list. So figure out which community you most associate yourself with. And you can pick up a hat to have in the photo. When the photo happens, we don't need you guys to cluster by hat color. You can mix through, that's great. Yeah, looking forward to that. And one last thing in terms of the agenda today, we realized yesterday that there was a lot of front-loaded plenaries all the way up to the lunch period. Today we have a morning plenary, then we're going to have a paper presentation session, followed by lunch, and then we have a working session after lunch, and then a sandwich plenary at the very end of the day. So we realize that many of you are struggling to figure out which room to go to. Because there's more than one interesting room. We think that's a good problem to have at a meeting here, but please do look through and see some things that you already know and some things that you want to learn more about.
And Alex, I think also there was one room that was kind of hidden, right, that people had trouble finding. So we talked about that this morning. We're going to try to put signage up so you can get to the breakout rooms that you want to go to. I think there's one that's kind of off in a corner. So we'll be making sure. Wonderful. Now let's turn to our morning plenary. Here we go. And I want to introduce Laure Tal from IPAR, who is a member of the AgMIP Executive Committee, who is the leader of the session. So Laure, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Alex, for this nice but difficult task of moderating, introducing this session on enhancing inclusion, equity, and justice in food system modeling. In this room, there's all sorts of modelers. And for most of you, this question of inclusion, equity, and justice can be difficult to put into parameters and then into models. But we'll see how we can achieve that. I will just give some words before we start, and I can just talk from where I am sitting. And I am coming from Senegal in West Africa, a developing country. And for me, food system, global food system is coming from colonialism. And we are out of this phase. We have made big changes politically, and I think that if we can succeed to make these big changes, we can also make these changes appear in our food system. We've been talking about how this global food system is threatening the climate, is threatening our right to have safe, affordable, healthy, and sustainable food. And we also come up with the strong idea that food is a right, because if we talk about justice and fairness, it means that it's a right. But we are in the United States, and the United States do not recognize food as a right today. So as scientific, as people out there, it's somehow our role to advocate for this right for food. So this is all for the policy or political talk, and I would like to really welcome Kate McKenzie. Kate McKenzie is the Executive Director of the Mayor Office of Food Policy. We are here in New York, so it's just normal, just fair that we have someone from New York City talking to us. As an Executive Director of the City Mayor Office of Food Policy, Kate advises the mayor on all issues related to food policy and cities' food system. Kate did more than that. She released Food Forward New York, the city's first ever 10 years food policy plan, which lays out a comprehensive policy framework to reach a more equitable, sustainable, and healthy food system by 2030. She led the city's good food purchasing commitment, focused on increasing access to healthy, sustainable food for the over 230 million meals and snacks served daily by city agency. Through this work, information about the city food procurement is publicly available using a dashboard that she will talk about later. Kate also led the city interagency COVID-19 food response to ensure that no New Yorker experienced anger due to the pandemic. She also oversaw the development of groceries to go, the city's first nutrition security program that provides New Yorkers with an online electronic voucher to buy healthy food from local business. Kate is a recognized leader with over 2 decades of experience building food security and broader anti-poverty solution in New York City and nationally. She comes to the mayor's office after nearly 2 decades in nonprofit and academia. And she's not only talking with this mayor office hat. Kate holds a degree in public health nutrition from this very university, Columbia University, and a bachelor degree in nutritional science from Cornell University. She is also a registered dietitian, and please welcome Kate. And Kate, before you start your talk, I am really sorry. Nutrition and diet is orange and not pink like your.
Know, I love it. I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
This is the nutrition hat.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here and to see all of you. I know many of you have traveled a long distance to come to New York, and I hope you really enjoy our city, which is, of course, a food city. And we are really pleased to have you and Cynthia for hosting this incredible event to pull together the cutting edge interests of food and climate. So thank you. And Laura, thank you for the very warm introduction. New York City has had a mayor's office of food policy for quite some time. However, it wasn't until February of 2020 that this office was codified into law. And what that means is that our city will always have a very clear focus on food policy. Because as this room knows, food policy is not just about ensuring that people are fed, which we grapple with every day in this city, but we also need to make sure that that food is healthy, that that food is supporting our regional food system, and the implications of our climate and our environment are also considered within that. The goals of my office are to increase food security for all New Yorkers, to promote access to and the consumption of healthy foods, and clearly to drive and support the economic and environmental sustainability across the food system. So as a mayor's office, as was mentioned, we work to not just advise the mayor and city leadership on food policy, but that's expressed in a myriad of different ways. As was mentioned, the city serves more than 230 million meals a year. And of course, the predominant driver of that is through our city's school food program, which is the United States' largest school food program, serving more than 1 million kids a day, the majority of their calories, predominantly in breakfast and lunch. And unfortunately, for far too many children, those are the only meals that they are getting because poverty is such an extraordinary reality in this city. We also serve meals through our older adult centers and in home delivered meals for older New Yorkers, as well as in our corrections system for our detainees and people in holding, as well as our homeless population. I must absolutely acknowledge the work that this city is experiencing and leading in this country around providing home and food to the extraordinary number of asylum seekers that come into this city every single day. So we are also, in addition to those 230 million meals, providing upwards of 75,000 asylum seekers with 3 meals a day. Our food businesses, whether it's restaurants, food manufacturers, or the thriving urban agricultural opportunities that our city is making available. We want to do more business with MNWBE providers of all things, whether those are meals and, again, businesses and other ways to support that thriving sector. Food infrastructure, shouldn't be missed on most that we have one of the world's largest food distribution terminal markets up just over the river here in Hunts Point in the Bronx. And I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about our role as a driver of good food procurement, and specifically all of the food that we're buying to serve those vulnerable populations. We have an ability to make good choices in that food. We also convene and advocate, and that is a role for the City of New York. And through our mayor's office, we're able to ensure that all of our agencies, the City of New York is an employer of 300,000 people that serve New Yorkers. Our job is to make sure that equity in particular is at the core of those policies, and we're making sure that community groups their feelings, their interests, and their experiences in working with the city are top of mind and operationalized through our city strategies. So in honor of the theme of this session, which is around prioritizing equity and inclusion, and of course justice, I want to really draw attention to something that our Mayor's Office of Equity releases every year, which is a report on the social indicators of equity in each of the domains represented here. So again, it's not just about talking the talk around equity. Under Mayor Adams' leadership, I know firsthand that equity is what drives our city leadership in every decision that we are making. And so we're ensuring that certainly, where there's disparity within disparity, we're paying attention to that. And certainly in the way that the Mayor's Office of Food Policy articulates equity and inclusion is exemplified in Food Forward, which is our 10-year food policy plan. Some of the areas that I would particularly highlight here, in our distribution of emergency food, we created an algorithm to determine how the city distributes $53 million worth of food to soup kitchens and food pantries across the city. And in areas where they were particularly hit hard by COVID, which, by the way, and probably no surprise to all of you, those are also the areas that suffer from the highest rates of chronic disease, the lowest investments, the lowest income. Those are areas that need an extra impact to make sure that more city resources are there to support the communities and the infrastructure and the longevity, the livelihoods of those communities. So whether it is in focusing on the distribution of city resources, whether it is in looking at the good food practices of our city agencies, which serve our most vulnerable New Yorkers, those are articulations of how we are considering equity and inclusion in city food policy. So I'm going to spend the balance of the time here talking about a specific strategy and connecting that to the climate goals and the climate research that you all represent and are hard at work on, and help to think about how some of that research can be integrated and inspired represented in food policy in this city, but certainly across the world. As Laura mentioned, whether it's in Senegal, whether it is in Abu Dhabi, whether it is in Addis Ababa, these are some of the areas where I do know that we are looking at strong food policy. So we are looking closely at our greenhouse gas emissions in our city food and meal purchases. So we were the first US city to join the World Resource Institute's Cool Food Pledge. And what that means is that we have some resources and support, research support and guidance from the World Resources Institute to drive our carbon emissions down, and specifically the carbon emissions directly attributable to our food purchases. So we've committed to reducing that by 25% by 2030, but I'm going to speak more to this. The city wants to be more aggressive than that and actually drive a citywide and agency reduction by 33%. The issue of driving improved health outcomes, but also recognizing the sheer impact of food systems and climate makes this commitment essential to us. And how we do that in particular is looking at the Cool Food pledge, which requires that we're analyzing all of our city food purchases. So within looking at our Department of Education's spend on food, analyzing that by literally what we're buying, where is that food coming from, and requiring that all of the vendors that we're working with across the city of New York report on this information to us. Now, I want to note, because this is an opportunity for continued research in this area, we are not requiring specifics about the kinds of foods that we buy, but we are requiring transparency into our food system about where our food is coming from. And then given that data, we're able to determine how we can make more specific adjustments to what we want to procure. So here, so we'll produce all of these reports and get them analyzed by World Resources Institute, and then share all of this information publicly. So what I want to, if you go to nyc.gov/food policy, you'll be able to see all of the line item purchases that the city is making, the serving sizes of a particular item, the specifications of certain kinds of foods. And why this is important is that for particular areas or regions or producers of food, to get a signal, number one, about the quantities of food that we are actually procuring, and to be able to determine how might I meet that need. How might we be able to, as a group of New York farmers, aggregate our product to be able to supply an agency in the city of New York? This is particularly important to us as we also strive to procure more New York State product coming into the city. So you'll notice here, a few things that you'll notice here is that while the city, we started collecting this data in 2019, and you'll notice that while we were procuring just 3% of beef, which again, this group is going to know that when it comes to carbon emissions, it's the beef industry in particular, whether it's the production of that at the farm level, that's causing our emissions in food in the food system. And so we want to just look at this data and determine how are we evaluating that as we come to make our reductions in our emissions. So if we look at that, and again, we're not saying that this is using World Resources Institute's greenhouse gas calculator, that's representative of 42% of our emissions. And just in 2 years, as we reduce that already very low percentage to 1%, we're able to reduce our emissions by half, particularly in that space. But this is not just about a particular commodity or a particular area. And this is part of our call to action and request for help from all of you, is to help us understand more about the different production practices at the farm level and how we might be able to get even more specific information that's not at an aggregate level, but at a very specific level. So some of the interesting things here are just also that we're looking at this for the first time. And so it's with a great deal of humility that we're also coming to this to ask researchers to help us understand the nuances of things that we are not acknowledging yet. But also, as a city, we know that this is really important for us to continue to advance and shine a particular policy priority on. So you'll notice also, I want to connect that what's driving this change is also our food standards in the city of New York. Since we've been, since 2008, actually producing food standards for the meals and foods that we purchase that are particularly to drive down rates of chronic disease. Those standards were just updated in April of last year, and on Saturday, a year after that information was made available, will go into effect. So it is actually through those food standards, which specifically call for reducing the amount of times a week that beef in particular can be served, and introducing minimums for the number of times that plant-based proteins, particularly beans, should be served also. And again, we're recognizing that we are serving a very vulnerable population of New Yorkers, and that this is really trying to drive healthful choices in their diets. So there's a number of other specifics about the food standards themselves that I'm happy to discuss, but it's using this policy lever of health standards that also have a secondary impact of driving environmental impacts as well. And that's something that, particularly within this administration, we're really keen to see advanced, is the connection of, while driving individual health changes, we're able to also make health environmental change as well. You know, I will note also that in April of this year, for the first time, the city included food initiatives in our sustainability plan. The mayor and chief climate officer released our first integrated greenhouse gas inventory, which incorporates emissions resulting from New Yorkers' consumption of goods, services, transportation, food, and housing. In this integrated inventory, food is ranked as the third major contributor to emissions. I will say that again. Food is our third major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions following buildings and transportation. With this new evidence, not only has the city committed to reducing the carbon footprint of the food it purchases by 33%, but it's also launching a plant-powered carbon challenge to spur the private sector to take action by reducing food-related carbon emissions by 25%. This commitment crystallizes the work of agencies already serving less carbon-intense foods. And in particular, I want to highlight the work of our New York City public hospitals, the 11 public hospitals in this city, as well as our public schools who offer plant-powered Fridays, but also in our public hospital system, the plant-based option is the default option for patients in our hospital settings. And that is also met with very high patient satisfaction, while also having the unintended outcome of reducing costs overall. So, you know, we're on track, particularly within the hospital system, to serve 850,000 plant-based meals this year. And they have already seen a 36% reduction in the agency's carbon emissions attributable to their food purchases. So a few of the areas that we are, as I mentioned, this is an area of a new frontier for the connections of food policy and environmental policy in the city. And we're eager to begin some work with Colorado State University and the Foundation for Food and Ag Research beginning in September to look at modeling within our region for how policies in New York might signal changes in different crop needs, the production, and how different crops, whether those are potatoes and apples, and any number of other commodities that the city might be able to procure more of. So that's an area that we're really looking forward to. I was chatting with Cynthia just a moment ago. We're really keen to learn from this school's work together with our Department of Environmental Protection and the Watershed Ag Council up in the Hudson Valley to be able to do more connections between the watershed investments that the city makes to our food shed that also implicate our carbon shed really in the region. We also, together with our Department of City Planning, convene a regional food working group that provides a convening space for dialogue and discussion about things that we might consider as a city, and also how we continue to learn and be influenced by our region. Thank you so much for this opportunity. We are really here and eager to hear about your research and figure out ways that research can make its way into governance at the municipal level to, again, continue to drive healthy and strong food and environmental policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Maybe we have some questions from the audience. Before I will leave them some time to gather their thoughts. I have one question for you. Sure. Thank you for your really nice talk and the way you managed to tie science and policy within your daily task. You talked a lot about food for everyone, food for every New Yorker. How do you go from food security, food for all, to food nutrition?
Yeah, Well, and I also want to appreciate, this is a dialogue that I know globally, but also in this country is front and center, which is talking more about nutrition security in replace of just food security. And implicit in that, much like what I referenced with our food standards, is, at its most basic level, is not enough to just feed people. That's in a country, and particularly in a city with as much knowledge and certainly need that we have here, we have to be caring about what we're feeding people. We're dealing with a healthcare crisis that is literally killing our citizens and our populations, and until we start feeding people better, we're never going to see our health outcomes improve.
Thank you, Kate. We have three questions.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. In this conference, we've talked a lot about food shocks, and I know you dealt with a very big one with COVID coming through, so I wonder if you could give us just kind of short reflection on how that type of shock event reverberated through your office.
Certainly. We could have a whole week on this. And I actually don't think that there has been enough exploration about the learnings and insights that, from a food perspective, that we did gather during COVID. But I want to, I did not mention, and again, because this is an incredibly diverse group, and clearly our city is incredibly diverse as well, the need that we have to ensure that there's cultural representation in our food, and that particularly in the, quote, emergency flows of food that tend to come into areas when there is a crisis, are not representative of enough cultural, whether it is halal meals, whether it's kosher meals, whether it is the need to, again, pay particular attention to older adults who struggle with different types of needs for opening food. But so just from that perspective of sheer, availability of different kinds of food, that is an imperative, but also our whole supply chain, and needing to really, this is, I think for this group, probably more relevant, to really focus on short supply chains rather than depending excessively on large single streams of food. And that is something that we are beginning to, again, operationalize in a way of how we're looking at our procurement reforms in ways that we can have priority for some shorter supply chains, so that when we are in times of crisis, we are not left without food.
We have two questions here, another one over there. Maybe we will take all the questions and then you will answer.
You're in charge.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation, and it's wonderful to see what the city is doing on that end of the value chain, if you will, and spectrum. We know that food loss and waste is possibly the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, and I know the city is, of course, home to so much going on with restaurants. And tell us a little bit about what the New York, your food policy office, or the city in general, is doing about food loss and waste initiatives and policy.
Sure, thank you for that question. And this is, again, as I really want to appreciate, particularly in New York, it's our Department of Sanitation that is on the heels of rolling out citywide curbside composting. And this has been, I would say, done with challenges to equity because of the infrastructure in how we collect food. But I will say that as we continue to roll out, whether it's curbside composting or enhancing our ability to pick up from different types of haulers, and whether it's restaurants or other producers of true food waste, those are areas that we are, particularly with the leadership at Department of Sanitation, lifting up. So I think, we also are looking at, again, whether it is our Hunts Point, our different food hubs across the city, and making these connections of separating and finding ways to ensure that our food waste does not end up in a landfill. I will also say that we have, as a city with nearly 9 million people, the education about how to separate. I have 2 kids in our public schools, and there's a lot to do with, hopefully at the earliest age possible, that we can start with, we all know that there's bins for recycling, and how we can get more familiar with organic waste going into something separate. so that then that just becomes the routine and the rhythm and the expectation of young people all the way through their life cycle, because it's ultimately our individual behaviors that we need to begin to address through both education, but making it easy. And so this is an area, I really appreciate the question, and with, our Department of Environmental Protection, looking at different ways of anaerobic digestion and other ways we're trying to address that segment of food waste and its role in, again, keeping it out of landfills.
Thank you, Kate. So my question is comprised of two parts. So the first part is that, so there are estimates saying that at national level, the food waste can amount to more than 1/3 of all the food product produced. So is the mayor office have estimates on how much, say, a portion of the food was wasted? And my second part of the question is that since by intuition, the food waste was, say, larger or stronger in the more wealthy part of the society. So why not putting, avoiding the food waste as the top priority for reducing GHG emissions and also the equity for the food? Thanks.
Thank you for that question. Several years ago, there was a modeling done by Natural Resources Defense Council that looked at, again, I would say heavily modeled, so I don't want to cite it because it's dated at this point, but I will also make a call for research right now that is an area that we need more up-to-date information on. We've also partnered with the support of Amex Foundation with Eco Data Lab to produce, and actually this is, I don't yet have the final, but we're looking at something called actionable data indicators, again, on these larger questions of looking at our food emissions. And so in that integrated inventory that I mentioned, that is a modeled report, right? And it's something that you pointed out I really want to lift up, which is that particularly for lower income people, it is modeled that they have less food emissions, right? Because this is clearly connected to consumption and what you're able to buy. So as we look at mechanisms, and I would say the City of London is pretty advanced in this work, to be able to figure out behavioral nudges and things to focus on the household level to drive down, again, food waste. So this is, again, a new frontier for us to be able to look at not just how we're picking up, we're focusing on composting, but again, how we are really focusing on helping and providing education and resources and nudges to our population to help drive changes in that direction. It's often said, I'm really curious for those of you who are, of course, coming to New York from other countries, whether it's serving sizes, whether it's, what you're expecting on your plate, there's a lot of food waste that's happening based on the, feeling of needing to fill your plate, or, doing too much shopping and then not eating it. So these are all some of the things that we're looking at, and that actionable data indicators report is trying to identify different types of data sources beyond just looking at our American Community Survey data that is coming up with some modeled resources about what our emissions at the household level are likely to be.
Thank you. I think that will be the last question because we are running late on the program. Thank you again, Kate, and I would like to acknowledge the effort made by the city on transparency, accountability, and data, because AgMIP is feeding on data. So I think that we will look at that more closely. Thank you again. I'd like to have a picture with the hat. Really, really.
Well, every panelist afterwards, we can have one.
I don't know which one I should take. I think I'll go to the economy. Can we have a picture with that? Yeah. Great. Good?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll keep it in the secret files. So thank you, Kate. And now we will continue with the panelists. Is Carolina arrived? Yes? Okay. So please come to the table. We will have for the panel today Carolina Saavedra, Roberto Valvidia, and Sitembile Mwamakamba. Please. Do you want to stay with us? Or? Okay. So for this panel, we will discuss among ourselves and share with you. Coming from this talk on how the New York City is trying to tackle this question of inclusive and more equality on food and food system for their citizens, we are really pleased to have with us Carolina. Carolina is the Community Engagement Manager at Stone Barn Centers. She's also sous chef at La Morada, where her family fights to ensure equality and social justice and to preserve their indigenous roots within the South Bronx community, and the garden president, steward of the Bruckner Mott Haven Community Garden. Chef Carolina has represented the US at multiple gastronomy events in Mexico, and she is a sought-after chef who has taught a leading cultural institution, including the New York Botanical Garden, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, NYU, and City University of New York Graduate Center. In 2021, Carolina was named one of the Times Out NYC Woman of the Year. Congratulations, Carolina. And Carolina, can you share some insight from your experience in making food, thinking about food, and having food not just as food, but also food to heal? Yeah.
Great. Well, to go into this, I have a PowerPoint presentation. And I could just. You can do it there. You can go there? Okay. Do I just speak into this? Great. Okay. So again, as mentioned, I have a lot of roles. I do a lot of jobs. My favorite one being my daughter's single parent, Alila, a 5-year-old, which makes, my mission in life, even go harder after it. So here is Stone Barn Center for Food and Agriculture. If anyone's aware of it, it's 30 minutes up north, up in Tarrytown, New York. It's a nonprofit farm education and research center with a mission to catalyze an ecological food culture. Since 2004, we have been driving innovation and ecological farming practices and mindful food choosing that benefit human health, strengthens community, and protects the environment. Stone Barn Center is a place where farmers, chefs, diners, educators, and artisans come together to push the boundaries of sustainable farming and eating. Our programs range from everywhere to little kids to all the way to expert levels. And my role there specifically is to bridge the community to the farm's experimental work. Community being, soil health scientists, community being Columbia University, community being the Tarrytown Sleepy Hollow community that is literally 3 minutes away from us, community being urban farms all over New York City, community being farms located up and down the Hudson Valley. And this is my family restaurant. This is La Morada. La Morada is an indigenous, undocumented, family-owned restaurant and mutual aid soup kitchen located in the Bronx, where the secret ingredient is activism, a place that centers social justice, immigration and justice, and the betterment of the land. It's a place that addresses food access at its root. I quoted my mother here. She says, "You are not my customer, you are my neighbor, and you are treated as so." During the peak of the pandemic, La Morada was serving upwards 2,000 free meals a day. And for context, this is a 20-seat restaurant. Today is serving upwards 300 free meals that are culturally relevant every day. And to put things into more perspective, La Morada is located in the South Bronx in the Mott Haven region of New York City. where we live in a pandemic within a pandemic. Pandemic being police brutality, pandemic being environmental racism, pandemic being food injustice, pandemic being medical racism, and pandemic being COVID-19, and still seeing the effects of that. And last but not least, Bruckner-Mott Haven Community Garden. So it was founded by artist activists who were squatters in the building right next to the garden. I was granted full access to this garden in the late spring of 2021. We are currently in our 9th growing season. This is a place where arts, farming education, and access to green space interconnects through a holistic approach. And the irony behind all of this is that the very thing that displaced my family from their indigenous town, being the NAFTA, so the North Free Trade Act Agreement, right? They were indigenous farmers, is the same thing that I'm reclaiming over here in the South Bronx and sharing it with my community. Now, what do places like a community garden, like Stone Barn Center, a nonprofit organization, and like La Morada have in common? Is that they mobilize via communal needs. At Stone Barn Center, our immediate need or the communal need is soil health. So we listen to the millions and thousands and hundreds of microbes that are in the soil and then help them, be better, whether it's via cover cropping. Cynthia is part of this movement, so we're also excited about this. And then at La Morada is addressing, the communal need of hunger. Even though COVID-19 is claimed to be over, you still see hunger happening in our community. But the truth is, right, 40% of food grown in the US is still being thrown away. So we are actually living in a place where there's abundance. It's not that we're in need of food. It's not that food is being depleted. It's that there isn't being given access to food. 1 in 7 people in the nation still face hunger. And in my community of the South Bronx, 1 in 4. And this is where Bruckner-Mott Haven comes in. Because here, not only do we give access to green spaces, but we're also giving access to farming education and helping our community grow culturally relevant food together. And what I like combining all of these 3 places, Stone Barns, La Morada, and Bruckner-Mott Haven Community Garden, on top of mobilizing via communal needs, they are helping giving us all a taste of what the future could look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. After Kate and you giving needs, demanding evidence, we will have the pleasure to welcome Roberto. Roberto is an economist in the Department of Applied Economics at Oregon State University. He is the co-leader of the Regional Economics team of AgMIP and co-developer of the trade-off analysis model for multidimensional impact assessment. And when we talk about food system, we really talk about trade-offs. So Roberto, how do you do it? How do you access this demand through your modeling?
Complicated. But the first thing I should say is, Cynthia, next time we should plan for a field trip, and I know where we can go. So I'll start by saying that I think there is consensus that addressing social inequities and issues related to social justice and inclusion are key to achieve food system transformations, right? And I highlighted food system transformation is a phrase that we've been hearing since yesterday in our sessions and through all these presentations, right? But the question is, are we doing enough? And there have been several decades of investment on research and development, many development projects, international aid, policy interventions, technology innovations. and motivated by different things, right? From the Green Revolution, the Millennium Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goals, now the Paris Agreement, just to mention a few of these major drivers that motivate the policy action or innovations. And there have been positive impacts, but also unintended consequences, right? Like in the Green Revolution, we know that there has been issues. Yeah, it was good, productivity increased, but also there were issues in terms of health because of the pesticide use, a loss of the biodiversity, and another things that contribute also to create this inequality in many cases and in many regions. And I would like to quote a paper that was written in December of 1936 by Robert Merton. For those who don't know, Robert Merton is considered the father of sociology, and also he's a father of a Nobel Prize on economics, and he was actually a professor here at Columbia University, right? And so he has this very interesting, and I recommend this really nice article about anticipating consequences of actions. And just one extract on this paper says, the most obvious limitation to a correct anticipation of consequences of action is provided by the existing state of knowledge. The extent of this limitation may be best appreciated by assuming the simplest case where this lack of adequate knowledge is the sole barrier to a correct anticipation. So what does that mean, right? At that 90 years ago, he was saying, if we want to anticipate consequences, positive or negative, we need to understand what is happening. We need to have that knowledge. And that translates now to us in terms of having data, having tools, having models to be able to assess what are the possible impacts of policy, technology, and actions, right? And then 2 years ago, there was another paper published, Do Not Transform Food Systems on the Backs of the Rural Poor. I don't know, maybe some of you have read that, by Benjamin Davis, Leslie Lipper, and Paul Winters. You may know them from the FAO. And what they do is, many say that they are criticizing some of these global or aggregate reports like Eat Lancet or the IPCC reports. But to me, what they do is really posing a warning to us scientists, thinking that if we want to really address issues in terms of inequality and inclusion and other aspects that are really context specific, we need to start from that level, right? We need to understand what is happening at that level, and in the specific situations, specific production systems, specific regions, in order to really capture this. And they provide some recommendations in terms of what the models should have. And some of them are, need to be aware that local specific conditions are crucial, need to be able to characterize farm households and livelihoods, like off-farm income, labor, gender, ethnicity, capture biophysical and environmental and socioeconomic heterogeneity, and be able to produce distributional impacts. Average or aggregate analysis and results provide good approximation, but can really obscure the impacts on large population of households, especially those that are at the tails of the distributions, right? And then also being able to have approaches that can identify and assess trade-offs and synergies. So what we are doing in AgMIP, for many years, we've been working with our teams in Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, and we developed what we call the Regional Integrated Assessment. Many of you know, so I'm not going to go in detail explaining what it is. But this framework, this approach, checks several of these characteristics of whole farm systems, transdisciplinary approach, capturing these different heterogeneity conditions, and being able to produce distributional impacts, for example, assessing poverty rates. And it starts from characterizing the household, the farms, the activities, right? But if you see in this figure, we always have this figure representative of the regional integrated assessment, but you see there is a link also to the global, and we call global and national aspect, right? And I think that's also important to be able to capture not just what is happening in terms of the local specificity, but also the national policy, the national goals, the national interests. And it was interesting, it was good to hear yesterday Marco Sanchez's presentation about the national models. And I think Herman said, that's what we need in AgMIP, right? And exactly. And 2 years ago, we were working in this project funded by IDRC, the CLARE project, and we started developing what we call integrated national and regional assessments, what we call INARA. Thank you, Cynthia, for the name. Where the idea is to be able to at least start linking global, national, and subnational level scenarios, data, and models. And I think we have the tools to be able to address these issues, and we just need to implement. Of course, there are barriers, there are limitations like data, and like we discussed in our session yesterday, one of the limitations that we have is data. But developing these protocols and trying to implement those, it's a good step, I think, in the direction that would allow us to address equity, inclusion, and justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto. You are showing us that we can include some inclusion, equality, and justice within our model, but it is still crop modeling, or sorry, production modeling. And we need to see how we can go further than production if we want to think about food system. And to go further, maybe not within the modeling, but go back to policy, how we can bridge the gap between research and policy makers. We will listen to Sitembile Mwamakamba. Tembi is the Director of Policy Research and Analysis at the Food, Agriculture and Natural Resource Policy Analysis Network. Her work focuses on policy and practice related to food system transformation, nutrition, resilience, climate change adaptation and mitigation, and sustainable development. Tembi is also a member of the steering committee of AgMIP. Tembi, please show us the way. How do we talk to the policymakers?
Yeah, you've set me a challenge, but I will do my best. I will do my best. I do not speak model language, so you will forgive me if I am diverting from the sort of normal speak at AgMIP meetings. So yeah, the question is really how do we enhance inclusion, equity, and justice in food systems, and how do we link researchers to policymakers? My simple answer is leave no one behind. I think it's a statement that we've all heard in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, but I think it's also a statement that we need to think deeply about within the context of the AgMIP family. So leave no one behind is a central transformative promise of the 2063 is the African Development Agenda, but I'm on a global stage here. So 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is enshrined in the Sustainable Development Goals. It represents a commitment to eradicate poverty in all its forms. It also represents a commitment to end discrimination and exclusion and reduce the inequalities and vulnerabilities that leave people behind and undermine the potential of individuals and humanity in general. So how does it apply to AgMIP? So AgMIP, as I have understood it, in the last day and in the 6 months or 8 months that I've been part of this family, at the essence of AgMIP, it's really about addressing the complex global challenges that our food systems face. And so if we are to address these challenges, we need to create an environment where all can participate, and we need to create an environment where we work in partnership to mobilize and share knowledge expertise, technology, and financial resources at all levels. The utility of the food systems models that we have been talking about in this past day and today, or the climate models, the economic models, will greatly depend on how effectively the modeling or AgMIP community is able to synthesize, communicate actionable evidence that is timely, credible, and practical with governments who are in the driving seat of policy development, but also how you engage with national parliaments, local authorities, farmers, indigenous people, civil society, and the private sector in follow-up and implementation efforts, and bridge that gap between people's needs and national policy setting. So it's really about how do you speak a language that you don't speak? Because you're scientists, you're modelers, and you know that very well. But policymakers, farmers, private sector, they don't speak that language, but they need that information that you are generating to be able to do what they do well. So on the topic of engagement, I want to share a little bit about where I'm coming from, FANAPAN, which is a policy advocacy organization. We are keenly aware that the policy space has really been the preserve of government, people, or the state actors, as we often refer to them, with little or no contribution to non-state actors. We are seeing that change where there are starting to be opportunities for engagement between those two communities. And what we really do is we seek to enhance a multi-stakeholder approach for researchers, farmer organizations, agribusiness parliamentarians, the media even, and non-state actors to utilize evidence and articulate their interest in important food systems policy debates. So in order for us to do that, what we are doing is that we rely on multidimensional intervention strategy that includes multi-stakeholder policy dialogue platforms. These policy dialogue platforms, they are at two levels. At national level, I think we have heard about the need to move from the national to the regional and then to the global. So we work from the national level to the regional level and ultimately to the global level. Our multi-stakeholder policy dialogue approach is really about linking research to policy. What we do is that our dialogues are organized around a shared multi-country research outputs. For instance, the work that you've been presenting here during these last couple of days, we will take that evidence, have it sort of presented at national level, ask the different stakeholders how they see that applying to their different circumstances or environments that they work in, and ask the important question of, is it useful? How can you apply it? Is there anything that is missing that you need from this? That way we are also informing the research agenda. We also believe that evidence is more than just scientific data. At FANAPAN, we promote policy options based on evidence from research and analysis, but we also give an important standing to voices, views, and experiences and feedback from different groups. We also see policy dialogue as more than just an event. It's a process. The policy analysis, the FANAPAN policy analysis approach involves at least 6 main activities: researching and analyzing, designing and recommending, advising strategically, mediating, democratizing, and clarifying values and arguments. So we are really about looking at the science, but also looking at the non-scientific. We put a lot of stock in indigenous knowledge. And I think that's one thing that probably we need to open up to as part of the AgMIP network. On a global scale, we have seen the power of multi-stakeholder dialogues with the recent UN Food Systems Dialogue, where all groups with a stake in food, such as producers, processors, distributors, were invited to the table to come together to address the world's pressing global food systems challenges. And from that, 3 key lessons that I've picked that I think the AgMIP family should adopt. It's about inclusive decision making. Effective food system modeling requires the involvement of diverse stakeholders. It's about making sure that their active participation brings in different perspectives, needs, and priorities, and that these are considered. So it's leaving no one behind. It's also about local knowledge and expertise. Engaging stakeholders bring forth valuable local knowledge and expertise. By including their perspectives, we ensure that the modeling process aligns with local realities and respects traditional practices. And finally, it's about creating ownership and empowerment. Engaging stakeholders will foster a sense of ownership and empowerment, and when involved in decision-making, they'll gain confidence, recognition, and a stronger voice in shaping policies that affect their lives. So really, at the end of it, it's about leaving no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you to all our speakers. Unfortunately, there is no enough time for questions from the audience. I'm really sorry about that. I suggest that we continue this conversation over coffee and during the remaining days of the conference. And thank you again for giving insight on how to enhance inclusion, equity, and justice in food system through activism, research, policy, governance. Thank you again.
All right. Our next speaker is going to be joining virtually. We're just verifying the final connection. But while we're doing that, I would encourage people who are standing in the door, there's still space. There's seats up here. So come on in. I'm waiting for the thumbs up. But while we're waiting, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Karen St. Germain is the Division Director of the Earth Science Division in the Science Mission Directorate at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA. She provides executive leadership, strategic direction, and overall management for the agency's Earth science portfolio, including a fleet of 25 satellites that are currently viewing our home planet from space, each of which, or many of which, have multiple instruments, giving us different types of information about our home planet. Her program also includes technology development of the next generation of Earth-observing satellites, and a robust research and applications program to understand how land, ocean, atmosphere, and cryosphere systems work and interact. If Karen has successfully been able to join, we'd encourage you to please, I will stop sharing on my side, and hopefully Karen can.
Hi, everyone. It is great to be with you. Sorry for the technical difficulties this morning in joining you. It's great to be with you. I wish I'd been able to be there in person, but it's great to be with you this way. And I'm going to try to share some slides with you if I can. All right, is this in? Let's see. I don't, sorry, folks, I'm trying to figure out how to do the sharing here. Oh, there we go. Share screen and window and that and
That's looking good. So we see the Explore Earth slide in full screen. Looks good to go.
All right, fantastic. Well, that was easy. All right, thanks for your patience. Again, great to be with you here today. I'm going to jump right in. Many of you are of course, familiar with what NASA does today with missions like Landsat, GPM, SMAP and others, we produce data that is used by the agriculture community every day to inform decisions. Sometimes that information comes to them through other agencies, sometimes they use it directly. And with more than 50 years of Landsat missions, agriculture is actually one of NASA's longest served communities. And of course, as you folks know better than most, we're experiencing some significant changes in the Earth system. And in particular, our food producers are seeing the impact of those changes. So what they are asking and what Earth Science is asking is, where are we headed? What do we do next? So we've been really trying to put a spotlight on our agriculture work over the last couple of years, and increasing the level of engagement with the community to ask more questions, not only of ourselves, but also of the community that uses our data. So in amplifying those efforts over and increasing the connections to the agriculture community, we've engaged in a number of major outreach efforts, like attending the Commodity Classic, which is, as many of you may know, the largest farm trade show in the US, to going out and walking in fields and talking to and listening to individual farmers. We're accelerating efforts to bring our partners closer into the enterprise. And this includes university researchers, NGOs that are willing to work with NASA, and other government agencies, of course, like USDA and USGS, to try to advance our state of understanding and collaboration. So just let's see, this maybe should be, there we go, there's the animation. So showing you here the NASA Earth observing fleet of in the neighborhood of 25 different missions. So we highlighted a few missions in the beginning, but really what we're about in our science is bringing together the data from this entire fleet. We have 26 missions in orbit now, and they of course observe land, ice, oceans, atmosphere, and they represent a pretty massive investment over 20 years. We use that remote sensing capability to look at our planet as a system of systems. And of course, you see the way we've broken down the science here on this slide. Weather and atmospheric dynamics. Weather is crucial to farming. In fact, in our discussions, we find the agriculture community to be extraordinarily savvy when it comes to the kinds of data and information we provide. Increasingly, we're getting questions about climate science and our understanding beyond weather and atmospheric dynamics. And of course, that unique vantage point of space, the space-based observations, they allow us to measure the water and the energy cycle, how the carbon cycle is impacting ecosystems, the planetary boundary layer, and its influence over weather, and so much more. So it's this system of systems approach that really gives us the kind of insight that we think the community is calling out for. NASA has an incredible group of people, some of whom I'm sure are in the room there today. Dr. Rosenzweig, Alex, who introduced me. Thanks, Alex. Of course, Brad Dorn from our home here at NASA headquarters, and all of you in the room, many others in our enterprise, too many to name, but you're all working toward this vision of integrating earth science data in many cases with what the agriculture community knows, and often we do that merge in crop models. And of course, it comes crop prediction comes down to, as you all know, management practices, genotype, and the environment, and bringing all of that information together, because of course farmers can control the first two, but they don't control the environment. So understanding what their decision space is in the context of a changing environment is a really critical role that you all play. One of the things that we hear loud and clear when we're in conversation with ag producers is when we go out and talk to them, it's not all, hey, NASA's doing great stuff, or sometimes they can be pretty vocal about what they need us to do better. And one of the things that they talk about is the need for improvements in the drought monitor. So we use GRACE data to enhance the drought monitor in collaboration with land information system model results and so forth. And today we're working on updates to improve the U.S. drought monitor, and that's led by the Earth Information System and the SPORT program at Marshall Space Flight Center. So really trying to drive pragmatic improvements in products that folks use every day. There we go. There's the animation. One of the experimental products funded by Earth Science is this composite showing the comparison between the root zone relative wetness and groundwater wetness. Of course, the difference being depth there. Seeing these side by side allows the viewer to see that the root zone data is changing more rapidly than the deeper stored groundwater. Of course, that's not a surprise. But these products can help folks in our community, in the agriculture community, visualize what's happening. And of course, these are informed by GRACE and GRACE follow-on missions. It's important to note they don't try to represent human consumption of water, but they show changes in water storage related to weather, climate, and seasonal patterns. Another important experimental product is the 14-day outlook. And when we talk with farmers, they're really very excited to see this kind of work. Precipitation, of course, drives changes in soil moisture, but how fast or how hard precipitation occurs dictates the efficacy of the replenishment. And this is a complex land surface interaction between precipitation and soil moisture. So our models can constrain the predictions using SMAP and GRACE mission observations to ensure more accurate measurements. In this case, this is a 2-week outlook of soil moisture. So the top panel is the predicted 14 days in advance. So the 14 days prior to August 18th, this was the prediction in the top panel. The actual soil moisture on August 18th is in the lower panel. And you see there are broad areas where the prediction is looking pretty good. And then there's some areas, particularly you see areas in Texas where we didn't get it quite right. So this is an experimental product. People are really looking forward to the further development of this one. I want to highlight a new mission because it's coming to a land surface near you. This is the SWAT First Light. And so in addition to modeling, we have new observational capabilities coming online that we think are going to make a big difference in enhancing our understanding of the water cycle in particular. So SWAT is a mission that we built in collaboration with the French space agency CNES. And it's one of its principal functions was to measure sea surface height. And so on the left, you see our traditional sea level spatial resolution as derived from missions like Sentinel-6, Michael Freilich, Jason-3, and so forth. So really coarse spatial resolution. That's what you should notice in the left panel. On the right, we have the spatial resolution from SWAT. And so it's much higher fidelity. This is going to revolutionize our understanding of physical oceanography, because with SWAT, we will be able to see currents and eddies that drive minor, very small changes in sea level locally. We'll be able to see those changes in sea level. That will tell us about the ocean circulation and so forth. But that spatial resolution, that high fidelity spatial resolution on water height, will also allow us to see inland water bodies for the first time. So we'll be able to measure the height of lakes, rivers, reservoirs, and flooded regions. Particularly important in flooded regions because for many years we've been able to see extent of flooding, but not from space, but not how deep it is. SWOT will give us that height of the water for the first time for inland water. We have a lot of important applications. So we have an early adopters program. One of those is the Texas Water Development Board. They'll use this to SWOT data to monitor lakes and reservoirs across Texas that today, about half of which are unmonitored. In Egypt, the Alexandria University will use SWOT data to help improve management of dam operations in the Nile Basin, very critical to the entire region there. Over in the left panel, you can see in blue just how big the Nile River Basin is and how important that work will be. And then, of course, commercial providers will use SWOT data to provide commercially derived value-added products, including everything from coastal dynamics, infrastructure, and community impacts. So I think SWOT is going to become increasingly an important input to the kind of work that you do. You all may or may not be familiar with the work that NASA does to enable operational services across the US government. We just signed a new MOU to increase our collaboration with USDA. That was at a ceremony between Bill Nelson and Tom Vilsack last week. And it's specifically focusing on climate smart agriculture, or increasing our focus on climate smart agriculture, advancing the use of earth science in the field to inform decisions that improve management practices and potentially reduce greenhouse gas emissions and advance carbon sequestration, among other things. So that's specific to USDA, but you see a wide range of other agencies that we work with here. And of course, as more sectors of our economy and more communities around the country are seeing the diverse distributed impacts of climate change, every agency, or at least many agencies at the federal, state, and local level, will be pressed into service to help inform decisions. And we're working hard to make sure that the science that NASA does, the science that you all do, are available to support those decisions. This is a view of the value chain of information. So far over on the left are the observations, the modeling and simulation, and things like indigenous and traditional knowledge and so forth, creation of information. The next step is, of course, to take that information and develop it into usable information through translating the science into actionable information through user engagement, often co-producing with users the kind of tools that they need, applications and so forth, and then delivering those services. And those could be in the form of mapping, visualizations, extension services through universities, a wide variety of things. Users make use of those services, evaluation then comes back and feeds the whole process. NASA's focus is sort of on the left side of this value chain, and we often execute the right side of the value chain with and through partners. But this gets to the heart of our Earth Science, our NASA Earth Science strategy. It's the science to action strategy. Again, this is another way of looking at that value chain. On the bottom of the pyramid, the foundational knowledge, the observations, the technology that enables future observations, the missions, the data. That also, in that rubric of foundational knowledge, that includes our core models and so forth. The next tier up is all of the research that we use to advance that foundational knowledge and build new applied research areas. That allows us to get to the next tier, which is the solutions and societal value. That's that's work that adds to the public conversation, to the economic conversation about how we make informed decisions. And then at the top, advancing public understanding and exchange. The loop here is really important. We want all of that to come back and inform the questions we ask. We think science gets better by asking more impactful questions from a wider variety of perspectives. And so this is a virtuous cycle of science. What are we doing next? Well, we're moving forward, looking to build out the Earth System Observatory. This is the next generation of missions. You all will be very familiar with Aquaterra Aura and the Earth Observing System. As those missions age out, this is the set of missions that will largely replace those as foundational core observations. Of interest to you will be the clouds, convection, and precipitation missions. Aerosols, mass change, that will be the follow-on to GRACE. Surface biology and geology can tell us a lot about the health of vegetation. So this is all, I think, very relevant to the work that you do. So, we just in looking forward to how we think about things going forward, how we think about how all of this data, the missions, the data, the science, the models, the kind of work that you do, how does this all come together and why is it important? Well, again, I started my comments by talking about the Earth system science and moving into the application of that science using that same approach. So this is a little thought experiment. Imagine you manage a hydroelectric dam in the Western US, and your job is to figure out how much water you need to release to generate power. Well, as you all know, atmospheric rivers left a lot of snowpack in the California mountains, and that is, of course, melting, and that could overflow your reservoir if you don't release the right amount of water. But at the same time, the greater Western US is still in drought. If you let too much water out, you may not have enough later to generate power during your peak summer days. So what do? You need to make sure that, and what do we contribute? Well, we want to make sure that our models capture the water cycle to the fullest extent possible. You need more accurate weather forecasts and projections. So that's where the atmospheric observing system comes in. You also need to know groundwater levels, so you need data from the mass change instrument. And you need to know how much water is returning to the atmosphere, so you need evapotranspiration data from SBG. You need all of these advanced measurements, the modeling, to get to the kind of services that the manager of this dam could best make use of in their day-to-day decisions. And this is just one example to just illustrate how all of this work comes together. And the last thing, I can't close without extending an invitation to everyone to come to NASA headquarters and see the new Earth Information Center. It was just open to the public. Several hundred people are coming through the lobby every day to see this exhibit. We built it because we want to share how we see our planet as we see it. And so we hope you all can make your way to Washington, D.C. to visit. There's an immersive exhibit that we find very inspiring. There's a dashboard that really shows data and the way we see the Earth. There's a highlight reel on the work we do in agriculture. And we invite you to come experience it. And with that, I'm going to stop. I hope I haven't overstayed my welcome too significantly.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Karen. And I hope you've seen here that Karen is really demonstrating leadership and a commitment from the highest levels of NASA to think about how we can use these cutting edge technologies to serve the agricultural community and also to listen to what is really needed. And as part of that, I know there are a couple NASA headquarters people in the room. Brad Doran is in the back. He leads the Applied Sciences Program for Agriculture, and Kathy Hibbard is over here, who helps us with a lot of the carbon and research side of agriculture. So, Karen, I know your time is tight here, so I think we might funnel the questions in the room to those program managers here. And then the only thing that we have to say, Karen, is we have to figure out how to get you an AgMIP hat. And you have to figure out which color, which discipline you want to represent. So we will follow up with you on that. But thank you again for coming. And I think what we will do now in the room is prepare to head out. Everybody in the room is now going to get hats, and we're going to head out to take our photo. So Eric, I wonder if you can give us some quick logistics as to where we're going to go and where you can pick up your hat. Thank you again, Karen.
Thanks, everyone.